All right, so I have no idea how this works, so hopefully it works just fine. Um, but yeah, I wasn't expecting you to quite jump on so fast, being
I'm bored.
today. But yeah, I hear you. Um, so how's Poland? You told me a little bit about it.
Um, it's it's going pretty good, to be honest. Pretty chilled, relaxed. Since I'm working from like remotely, um, that's kind of all I do. Like just wake up in the morning. But the cool thing is I'm like 6, 7, 8 hours ahead of you guys.
Yeah,
So like by the time that you guys are up, if I have clients, most of their stuff is done, and check-in starts at 2 to 3 p.m. here. So it makes it super chill.
that's nice because I have to do a lot of my check-ins. Like I would prefer to do my check-ins first thing Saturday morning,
Hmm.
but unfortunately, I've got people that don't check in till like 10. So it's like by
Hmm.
that time I'm at the gym, and now I can't get back to you till 1 or 2. So um, it is what it is. But that'd definitely be nice. So if you don't mind me asking, why did y'all decide to go to Poland instead of coming here?
So we were kind of in a long distance relationship kind of thing.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, we're having a baby. We're just like, oh fuck, we're having a baby.
yeah.
So we kind of found out at the airport when we were in Brazil. So
Oh,
yeah. And
okay.
yeah, dude. And then we were both about to kind of like go to our separate countries. And then we're
Yep.
just like, what the fuck are we gonna do? And we're just like, I guess we'll just take care of it. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
So I basically started working on some paperwork, get some things all situated, and then I actually made the attempt to, yeah, I had my passport around that time. So I was like, okay, I'll just fly over to Poland, because I work remotely. It's not much
Yeah.
of an issue or anything like that. So I can kind of be there and take care of him,
Okay.
and her while I'm there versus being so far away from them.
So it was
Um,
just the easier transition overall.
Basically, it was just like, okay, this is the best option, so
Yeah.
do it.
That's awesome, man. I'm super happy for you. Um, So let's dive in. I'm a little curious about your bodybuilding career. I know that a lot of people seem to think that you're all genetics, um, but I think you've been at this a lot longer than people realize,
I don't know if you
even
can
than I realize.
consider. Well, well, if I were to start, I would say I got into the whole fitness thing like relatively young, maybe as young as like 8, 10 years old, like just doing push-ups and shit.
Yeah,
But I didn't really start the whole like journey into competitive bodybuilding until 2013 when I was just like, oh, okay, cool. I'm gonna do a contest prep, and I prepped for like 4 to 6 weeks. No idea what I was doing. Didn't have a coach. I was just like, let me just do a lot of cardio. Let me look this way, blah 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 blah. And then ironically, I did the show. The funny part about that was there was this other guy that was there that basically was wearing the exact same board shorts as I am. They kind of mistake him for me, and the dude was fucking massive. So I was like, "What is going on?" So that was like the first time I competed, and then I was like a little bit upset about it, but I also wasn't because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But I
yeah.
knew if I wanted to step on stage like the next time, I'm gonna have to just, put a little bit of more effort than prepping for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
So that
and
was
then
2014, you said?
what's that?
So that was 2014, you said?
20, I quote unquote at the time didn't know what off seasons were,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
basically just bulked for like 3 years.
yeah.
So 2013 all the way till 2016.
Okay, so 2013 was your first show, and then you didn't compete again until 2016.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you've
Um,
been at this for 11 years or so, right? And you turned pro in what,
uh,
2018?
2020.
2020. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew it was somewhere around there.
Yeah, I was pretty close in 2019, but it was just like such a stacked lineup in North Americas. So I
Yeah.
got like third. I was like a spot away, and I was so fucking livid. I
Dude,
was
that's
like, I was
frustrating.
this close. I was just so like, I was so mad.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I just kind of just was like, okay, cool. Uh, I'm gonna get I didn't really think like, hey, I'm gonna get my pro card, but like it was more of like when I want to step on stage the next time. everybody just has to know that I'm gonna get my pro card.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It needs to be obvious, right?
Yeah, it needs to be like, okay, this dude should be a pro.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's been pretty cool. I mean, I think that at some point you kind of hit this place where you're, and I feel like this happens to everybody. It's like you get to a level of muscularity, and then all of a sudden, 1 pound makes you look vastly different.
Mhm.
And I feel like you're kind of in that arena now, where it's like every little bit of tissue, you just look drastically better.
I think that would be like muscle maturity coming in over
For
time.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So,
Well, I competed the first time in 2018. But I like you, I was that dickhead kid that in PE class, we had this like you would lead the group in exercises, and I was, a lot of people did like weird stretches or, stuff that was easy, and I was that dickhead kid making everybody do push-ups and sit-ups. And so I kind of liked it back then, and then I fell in love with the gym at 16, but I didn't compete my first time until 2018,
mm,
which is when I really learned to eat. Before then, it was just like I had tried to eat. I had dated a girl, the first girl I dated in the industry, or that was into fitness. Her stepdad was a pro, but he was stationed over in Korea. And so she
mhm.
was like, I know how you need to be eating. You need to be eating 5,000 calories, and it needs to be chicken and brown rice and broccoli. And so I did, and I didn't put on any weight because, as you can guess, my digestion was horrendous. Um,
So, question about the digestion thing. I seem to see that a lot in bodybuilding. When that
mhm.
became like horrible, was it because you were eating the same foods over and over again at like a larger quality amount? Or was it because you had different variations of different food that caused it?
I think back then it was a culmination of a few things.
Okay.
One, I think I was eating way too many calories. I mean, we're talking about Paul, I was probably 180 pounds, 190 pounds, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's like maybe. Um, and I'm 5'10", right? So that's not very big. And then not only that, but I was bulk cooking my food. And so I'm willing to bet that more than likely I caught some salmonella within that time frame from
Okay.
like undercooked chicken, me rushing it or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, I also was like, if I couldn't eat, because I would prep the food for an entire week
Mhm.
at a time. And so a lot of times at the end of the week, it would be dry. And
Mhm.
so sometimes I would fill those calories in with other things like chocolate milk or
Mhm.
other stuff like that. Granted, I've always kind of had digestive issues my entire life. I've always been like hyper gassy, and I don't get constipated. I'm completely the opposite. And so I was going to the bathroom so much during this time that I was like walking. I was like waddling when I
Oh,
walked.
geez.
Um, yeah, so I don't think that it was necessarily like the amount of food I was eating, or I don't think it was one thing in particular. I think it was a culmination of a lot of things
Yeah, I can see that.
that did it, right? And
Mhm.
the problem with me at that time is that now looking back, I know that food should have been worked up first and foremost.
Mhm.
Secondly, I probably should have had a little bit more variety because it was chicken, brown rice, and then oats and eggs in the morning, and that was basically it. I think I maybe had a beef meal in there that was beef and brown rice, uh,
Okay.
but but that was basically it. So I should have had a little bit more variety in there. Um, but yeah, up until that point, I had used pro hormones because they were over the counter stuff. Now we know that they were more than likely oral steroids, and
Mhm.
I'd always seen results there, right? And so
Yeah.
after that diet, I was like, well, this doesn't work. Like, I'm just going to stick to the pro hormones. And when I turn 21, I'll start using steroids. And
Okay.
so I did. Um, and then at 25 is when I saw the first real results of a real diet, right? Because
Hmm.
even when I was in college using steroids, I was eating like an asshole, but I looked great and I was growing. So to me, it was like, this is the magic pill.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
that's kind of why I got into coaching. This, like, you know,
yeah. Just because, like, I guess for me, for like the whole getting into coaching is to make sure I don't let other people do what I did.
same. That's the same, exactly.
So like they have like an easier process than I did.
I'm trying to cut you. I'm trying to shortcut you here. Like, let's cut some corners. Off this
Yeah,
learning process.
exactly. Yeah,
But I,
I mean, I think that's pretty interesting how everyone just like gets into coaching just to like help improve others
yeah,
and it ends up turning out all right. And then you kind of steadily build like a good passion for it because like you're interacting with people, you're
mhm,
helping them. It's kind of like, okay, this kind of seems like my calling.
yeah. And not only that, but it's like we get to. I mean, I'm sure you were the same. Like you fell in love with training and seeing the results of training, right? It's that never-ending progression. And I had a thought today that I think that without progression, I don't know, without progression in something, and it doesn't matter what it is,
Mhm.
I don't know that we like what is the point? And that's a really like philosophical question, right? But like um there's a scenario that happened today that made me think about it, and it was just like if you as a person don't have anything that you're working towards and you don't have something to progress in, it doesn't matter if it's your day job or if it's a side job, if it's a hobby, whatever it is, if you have no form of measurable progress
Mhm.
in something, like how are you looking forward to the next day?
So there are people like that.
I don't understand.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like boggled me. It's like, what is your purpose? Like, what is it that you want for yourself? And for
Yeah.
some people, like, they legit don't know. But then there's like people that do know. And I think what that is for people who are into fitness, it's yeah, the main goal is to improve or progress in every aspect of life. But I think when you put bodybuilding in there, it's like a catalyst for so many different avenues for you to go to. But it's like bodybuilding's like, okay, this is a fun hobby. This is cool. I enjoy doing this. Okay, cool. I'm training.
Mhm.
But you're seeing like the visual representation
Yep.
of the progress of the things that you're doing, and then that becomes a little bit more addictive
Yeah.
in a sense. But then, like, once you start seeing that, it's sort of just like, okay, what can I take from this bodybuilding aspect, put it on into like maybe my job, maybe my family, maybe being a better husband or wife
Yep.
or whatever it is that you want to do. And it just drives people forward.
100%. I think that bodybuilding is unique in its ability to teach you that like falling in love with the process, because bodybuilding is the only thing where you can walk into the gym and you can kind of foresee what your future physique holds.
Yeah.
Whenever you get a pump, right? It's like you literally your muscles expand, right? And so like it's kind of like a visual representation of, hey, I can look like this if I just add some more tissue on, you know?
Mm.
So I think that that it makes it addictive in that sense from the get-go, and then that allows you to dig into the process and figure out the process, and then you fall in love, right?
Yeah. Especially the longer you do it, the more you're just like, "Ah, there's literally no point to this, but I like this. So I'm gonna do it anyways."
Yeah, it really, especially when you realize that like making money in it is very difficult to do.
Well, not even just that, like you could lose your gains in like a week or two. And you're just like, well, psychologically you think you're losing your gains in like a
You
week or
think you're
two,
losing them.
but then you're really not, and then you like start panicking. It's like, oh, I've worked so hard and all of a sudden it's gone.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like that's where it's more of like a psychological mindset thing.
Yep.
And I often find that the people who do tend to again make money off it or who tends to be really, really good at bodybuilding, they just have that mindset where it's just like I don't know what I look like. I don't care what I look like, but I'm just going to keep on doing this process and eventually I'll get to where I want to be.
Yeah. I've told people that before. It's like people ask me like, do you prefer your look in the off season or in contest prep? And I'm like, I don't have a preference. I have
Hmm.
one goal in mind, and that's to look better on stage. And so I understand that the look that I have in the off season is necessary, and so is the look that I have when I'm in prep. And it's just
Hmm.
cyclical, right? None of them are permanent.
Yes.
So if I look at it like that, like why do I care what I look like on some random Tuesday in the middle of an off season?
Hmm. Agreed.
Obviously I'm making sure that I'm not getting too fat and stuff like that. I'm not creating imbalances. Of course, that goes into it, but like as far as how lean I am, um, other than the progression aspect, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't mess with me mentally. I think it's cool to be big. I think it's cool to be shredded.
Yeah. I think like even then, when you're like making progress during the off season, it's sort of like, okay, I can't think of it. For us, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
what we look like in the off season or in the contest prep. But then there are people who psychologically are just like, okay, I need to look this way on fucking Tuesday or like Wednesday. I need to be
yeah,
shredded before I go on this date or whatever. But like, it's just, I think those people are inexperienced that they
yeah,
haven't gotten to the point where like they're past that like that ego is probably the best way to put it.
yeah,
They're not past the ego, they're still at the ego portion of bodybuilding. But
yeah.
then once you get to like past the ego, you're just like, oh, this is enlightened as hell.
So I'm curious as to what's your opinion on this because I know when it happened to me.
Mhm.
Um, how do you get past that ego point? For me, um, it was being humbled at nationals my first go around.
Yeah. Okay. Was that because when you competed at nationals, you found out that like you weren't where you needed to be and you felt like
Yeah,
I need more work to be done?
yeah. So in 2020, I won my first overall.
Okay.
Um, I knew at that show that I wasn't quite big enough.
Hmm.
Um, so we took a year off and put on tissue and went to 2021 NPC Nationals.
Hmm.
I was absolutely bigger. We had put on some decent tissue. Um, I wasn't near lean enough. We also didn't have an enhanced off season, so I don't think I put on near as much tissue as I could have.
Hmm.
Um, and then I got absolutely humbled. I mean, I placed 13th out of 36 guys, so I guess it wasn't that bad.
Hmm.
But I truly thought I was good enough to win.
Hmm.
And that's when I realized I wasn't, and I wasn't even
Hmm.
close.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I think I got past I never actually got to the point of the ego of bodybuilding. It
Okay.
was always more about just like, okay, I give myself a full year, I make
Yeah.
progress and see how I do. You know?
Yeah.
It's like if you give yourself a full calendar year and you just check all the boxes off, no matter how new, how experienced, how wherever you are,
Hmm.
if you do the same shit year after year, you're gonna make progress. It may not be quite a lot as the first few years, but it's progress. And
100.
because of that, the main focus isn't necessarily like to be good on stage or to be like, I mean, for most people it is. For
Yeah.
me, it's kind of like not to be I don't know. I don't know how to say it. Not to be competitive on the stage because I'm being compared to other people, but to basically go through the entire process of contest prep Sometimes it hurts a little bit. There's a lot of shit you got to do. You got to move around. You got to like do your cardio. But like the process of bodybuilding is what I look towards, what I look up to the most. And because at the end of the day, once that contest prep part is over, I get to eat food. That's all I care about. Like I don't give a
Um,
fuck about winning or losing. Just like, okay,
yeah.
I did better than last year. I looked better than last year. I
Okay.
improved. Cool. Sweet. And I just get the shit over with and just get some food.
So I've always been a little bit curious about your mindset because you seem to be a little bit more level-headed than most of us.
Mm.
Um, and I think that what you just explained kind of highlights that, or it exudes that level of level-headedness. So, did you play sports growing up, like, or were you
Yeah.
ever a competitive guy?
I was an athlete.
Okay,
I played multiple sports during middle school and multiple sports during high school. It's hard for me to ever say I'm competitive, but I tried really hard to be as good as I can be. That's the
okay,
best way to put it. Yeah.
okay. So you weren't the guy that was super angry when you lost, but you
No.
absolutely put in your effort to win.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
like I, I, huh, that is an interesting thing to think about. Um, when it comes to winning, um, I would admit there are certain times where I was a little bit upset about my like placing or whatever,
Hmm.
but that's because it was my fault.
Yeah.
It was my fault that I was the one who was like binge eating or some shit
Yep.
like that a few days into the show. Um, and I didn't do the cardio, I didn't do anything like
Mhm.
that. Cool. I know what I did wrong for that particular show or that particular year leading up to wherever I need to be. If I lose, it's my fault. Maybe sometimes it's not my fault, but I will
Yep.
always think it's my fault because if I continuously just think like, okay, I'm the best because I won this or I did this or whatever, whatever, I will kind of become complacent.
Yep.
So I try to put my mind in a position where it's just like, you're never good enough, but you're trying.
Yeah.
And that
Okay.
makes it super easy.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Because like,
What about growing up though? Like when you were playing sports, like was there a difference for you between individual sports versus team sports, or about your feeling towards winning or losing?
nah,
No.
it was fun. Like at
Okay.
fucking like that age, like I don't care about winning. I care about having fun,
That's
man.
so interesting, dude. That's so interesting to me.
Yeah, because
Like
like,
because so I grew up in team sports and individual sports, mainly just you're talking about baseball as a kid, and then football, track,
mm,
basketball. And in my early years of high school, um, it- there became this point to where the star athletes, I was never a star athlete. I was always like a mid-tier athlete, right? Like I was good. I was good enough to play on, the A team or junior varsity, whatever level I was supposed to be playing at, but I
mm,
wasn't the star athlete, right? Um, but there became some point where if we lost, the star athletes and the better athletes blamed everybody else, and I got
mm,
to a point to where I was just like, I don't like this. This doesn't work for me. This doesn't make sense. Like we just didn't play well today, right? Like I didn't want to lose, obviously,
mm,
but so I kind of I liked track and field because it was 100% relied on me. If I won, I won. If I didn't, I didn't.
mm,
Um, and it was that pursuit of trying to get better in my event, which was pole vaulting. Um, Looking back now, I wish I would have continued those team sports because I think that they had some memories and lessons to be learned. But hindsight's 2020,
mm.
um, and they ultimately didn't help me in bodybuilding. So, which is what I actually love. So, um, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, my first show, I didn't care. And then after I won that overall, man, not getting that first call out at that national show, I was so mad. The last nationals I did, though, I still didn't get a first call out. I mean, I ended up in eighth place. So it was middle of second, right there in the middle, anyways. And I was a little disappointed at first because I was peeled out of my mind. But then I was wondering, I thought that maybe we had messed up. It was kind of like the first national show, like we just missed the mark completely. And I was like, well, what did we do wrong? And then I looked at pictures and I was like, we did nothing wrong. I just wasn't the best person that day.
Mm,
So it was like from that moving forward, it was like, whatever, it
mm.
is what it is.
I do have to admit there have been an instance where I felt a little bit of disappointment in myself. I
Yeah.
think it was this year when I did the Dubai Pro, where um, hmm, I, I think I looked good
Yeah.
up to a certain point, but I wasn't conditioned enough. Um, and because I wasn't conditioned enough, I didn't get the first call out. And I think that was a little bit of like that kind of like broke me a little, not like broke me, but it like kind of made me think about it a little bit because ever since I started competing, it was always first call out.
Yeah.
So like for that first time, actually the second time, I think the first time was like when I did like a pro show, my third pro show where I got seventh. I was a little bit upset about that, but then again, I didn't wasn't upset because I was like, okay, I did this. I mainly wanted to do the pro debut, get it out the way. That was
Yeah.
what I was looking forward to the most. But then when I started doing like, oh, I did the pro debut, cool. Now I'm a week or two later, I got another show that I gotta do. Okay, cool. I
Yeah.
gotta do that again. And then a week or two later, I got another show I gotta do. All right, cool. So I'm just gonna not give a
So you
fuck
didn't even
anymore.
have time to think
Debut's
about it.
over. What's that?
Yeah. You didn't even have time to think about it.
Yeah, it was just like I either do this or I don't. But I've already kind of like planned everything. Everything's like set accordingly, so I'm just gonna do it because as the shows got closer, or as the contest prep got closer towards ending, I just kept on looking worse and worse. But it also didn't help me that much because the coach I had at the time was saying like, "Yeah, man, you look great. You look great." Um, yeah, I didn't like believe him because when that person was coaching me, there were some things that he was like doing off that was weird and whatnot. So I kind of didn't listen to him because I'm just like I'm not an idiot. Um, but no, like I felt the feeling of being upset when I did the Dubai show, not because I lost. Maybe because I got second call outs,
Yeah.
but it was mainly because I was there. I had the opportunity to do a show with Breon Ansley. Like the
And you
opportunity,
didn't get the
like be right
comparison.
there, get that first call out, be right
Yeah.
next to him, compare and see how things look.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't get that, but I also knew that it was just like there's a big difference between somebody that's an Olympian that's won like
Hmm.
classic Olympian like twice versus me who's just like not even done a pro show.
Yeah.
Or not even like one like a pro show. So at that moment I was just like kind of cheered up a little bit
Yeah.
because I knew I wasn't up there with the first call out with one of the greatest classic physique competitor that we've had aside from Bumstead. But then at the same time
Yeah.
I was just like why am I trying to compete with somebody who's had way more experience than me? He's way older than me. I still have room to grow. I'm just not big enough. I'm not mature enough. Why should I be upset about it? And then I was
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. Don't be upset. Just come in leaner and bigger. That's all you gotta do. And then
Yep.
just focus on the next process. And just continue doing that.
Yeah. 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 So how much under your weight cap are you?
Bro, I'm at my weight cap, dog.
Are you?
Yeah. So I've been prepping since freaking March.
Okay.
I basically just been growing into this prep this entire year. I actually started my contest prep in March at 198 pounds. But I pulled down from like 220 all the way down to 198 so I can kind of grow into the show. Because
Okay.
usually how I think of like growing into the show, or how people should at least think about it, is that during the off season, either you use little to nothing or you come off completely and then just focus on food, nutrition, making sure you're getting adequate rest. If you need to add a little bit of extra in, a little bit of test. And then when you do that, just like check off all the boxes, just repeat food, sleep, training, bump calories up, or whatever you got to do. So that way you don't need to rely that much on the drugs to be able to
Okay.
help you grow. Because in the off season, I think for classic physique competitors, you don't need much to get away with making great progress. If you remember when I was just like, you have an entire year, a calendar
Yeah.
year to make progress, most people, if they're consistent, just hitting the marks, they could make an entire year of progress with little to nothing. And then that way they can save their overall health, their overall time using for contest prep. Because what is our goal? To look freaking jacked and big and
Yeah.
massive on stage. So you want to kind of use the most amount of androgens or whatever you're able to handle
Yep.
go into the show, go into the stage, because the main goal is to, lose fat, but then build muscle tissue at the same time.
Mhm.
If you're relatively lean and you stay lean, and you did kind of like what I did, where I got to like 198 pounds with just a minimal amount, and then you start
Yep.
adding stuff in, you start eating more food, you kind of start growing. And that's kind of where I've been. So my weight is still the same as how I started my prep, but I look freaking jacked.
You're the you're one of the very few people I've ever seen do that transform one of the start of your prep. You're at the same weight as the end. Um, by come off, do you mean come off completely? No TRT, no nothing?
Yeah, for like a few weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. Especially, well, I think I only do it like after the show's over. Like
Okay.
after the show's over, your overall system is just overloaded with whatever you put in there or you have
Yep.
been putting on there. I mean, you can go on TRT, but the drugs themselves and the overall half-life, depending on what you've been using, is like 6 to 8 weeks max.
Yeah.
So they're still in your system, that you're just not going to get the extra oomph effect
Yeah.
that you would, but it's still in your system, that it's like while it's clearing out, you're doing certain things like maybe do the cardio, maybe improve insulin sensitivity from just slowly bringing calories up,
Yep.
moving around and doing all that stuff. You're focusing on the quote unquote health phase. Uh,
Sure.
and then I guess if you want to start during like the off season, you feel like you're good. Because I think the biggest things that people do now that's a bit of a mistake, they don't come off.
So I want so I want to know what you mean by don't come off. Do you mean um, they don't come off at all, or you mean like they don't like they're always running higher levels, super physiological levels? We'll just call that being on is super physiological levels of even testosterone.
Yeah, like just come off completely off the
Okay.
drugs. Like
Okay.
no test, no anything. Just get off the drugs, let the
Yeah.
body
Yeah.
recover. But you can only do this like post contest prep. There's usually like many ways that people try to like do this, which is one, you could probably bring the drugs up so that we can recover a little bit better after the post contest, but that's so
Mhm.
dumb. You've already been in such a huge amount of like detriment to like your overall health. So why are you still upping up the drugs just to preserve your gains? You have like a high amounts of like insulin sensitivity coming in post show. You just
Mhm.
ride that, hence the post show rebound without the drugs,
Yep.
because you don't need it. You're already like lean.
Okay.
So just
That's an
coming off
interesting.
just helps keeps things kind of like fresh for when you go back, because not that androgen receptors do downregulate, there is that potential chance of health, kidney, whatever issue that happened during the prep because gear was a little bit higher. So when you bring things down or take things off, you reduce that systemic stress and just let the body naturally just take its time to recover. You'll feel like shit, but hey, we already feel like shit trying to be fucking winning shows.
It's valid. That's an interesting viewpoint. So have you ever run labs, let's say like 6 weeks after being off of everything?
Yeah. Um,
Yeah. And
tested
does
pretty.
testosterone production come back at all for you?
It's pretty low. It dips down to like the 40s or 42. But
Okay.
there was just one instance where I did came off and I ran labs and everything. Before I took the lab work, I felt great. I didn't think anything was off. I didn't felt like anything was off. But
Okay.
then when I took the lab work and I saw like, oh shit, dude, your test is like 30 something, then that psychological, I guess, what's
Yeah.
the placebo kind of like kicked in. Like, hey
Yeah.
man, you're not on drugs. Because you're not on drugs, you should feel like shit. So it started feeling
Yeah.
like shit. But then it took me like 2 to 3 weeks to be like, okay, I was feeling better without the lab work. Why the fuck do I care what the lab work says? And I
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
continued
Yeah.
what I was doing.
Yeah. That's super interesting. That's a very different it's a very different thing than I do. It's a very different thing. I don't really know many people that do that, to be honest with you. Um, so for me, my last show, almost every show actually I've run, I've continued on cycle afterwards. Um, for like 6 weeks or so. Um, Last year it was just elevated test and some Masteron. The year I tore my pec, it was some DECA. That was with two different coaches. Um, and then I always pop back down to TRT, and by TRT I mean true TRT. Within ranges. So I haven't come off for some time. Now I typically do when I do come off of a cycle, I'll like skip a week of injections
Mm,
so that the levels have so they don't have this lasting elevated androgenic effect, right? So that they have a chance to kind of that half life kind of drops down and clears a bit.
mm,
But this last year, I did end up taking something like 6 months off
mm,
before starting prep. I was supposed to start prep and then ended up in the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack. Turns out it was just stress. I just had maybe a panic attack or something like that. It was just stress related.
okay.
But because of it, I went ahead and got a bunch of heart testing done because I do have to use a higher load to get similar results than other people. But with that, I don't have the same side effects that
Mm,
other people get. Um, so like I went through the heart testing, everything came back great. The doctor was basically like, dude, you have everything is great. Like you don't even have an enlarged heart, anything past what we would expect you to have, being a guy with muscle and being an athlete, right?
mm,
Because an enlarged heart is fairly normal for us. Um, and so, but at that point, we had decided to move the show because I was supposed to do North Americans. Now we're doing nationals in 6.5 weeks. So we just remained off of gear until like, I don't know, 16, 17 weeks out. So it was a total of like 6 months off of gear. And I will say that my response in that beginning was pretty nice.
And you didn't really need much than before.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that
Okay,
off of a
yeah, fair
recording.
enough. Fair enough.
We can talk about that off of a recording.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, response was great for then, and this has been by far the easiest prep. But also during that time frame, we also because we'd already started to pull food in the early phases, and I was losing weight, we just went ahead and rolled with it, right? And so strength kept getting better, the look kept getting better, weight kept coming down, so we just rode it out. I had a free meal once a week still. Um, and so we started prep, at a great place, and that now it's like This is by far the easiest prep I've ever done in my life. I'm eating just under 200 grams of carbs, only doing 30 minutes of cardio, and I've dropped 7 pounds in 8 days.
Solid. It's good.
So
Yeah, that's really good.
yeah,
Um, I think that's why like not well not saying it kind of makes sense to come off because sometimes you don't necessarily need to. You could just bring it down to like a TRT base level and
yeah,
you'll be fine. But it's more about the importance of just giving the body a break. That's all it
reducing the well. A lot of people seem to think that you know androgen receptors desensitize, right? But really, what it is it's oxidative stress. The oxidative stress from the hormones have just built up so much that they can't be responsive anymore. Your body just can't respond to the need anymore. So
Mm.
coming off of them is absolutely a necessity, right?
Yeah, because again, like they don't like androgens upregulate the more that you're using, obviously,
Yep.
because for it to kind of keep on regulating itself, you need to kind of up the dose overall.
Yep.
But there comes like a point of diminishing return where like that upregulation still is effective, but you have to remember about the downstream effect of like
Yeah.
the heart, the kidney.
At some point, the side effects,
Yeah,
the progress becomes like this, but the side effects jump like
just
this.
yep,
It'll be like, you know, whereas in the beginning, it's like side effects, progress. But at some point, they start to
yeah.
outweigh each other drastically. Yeah.
But it's about just like finding that perfect balance. That's why like the concept of like pushing whatever you need to or however you give yourself a time frame to push, awesome.
Yeah.
Pulling back, awesome. And then just repeat
Yeah.
and get that little bit of a break in between. And that's how like for me, I think that's how I've been able to like be very consistent with it. I'm not by no means like a top level competitive bodybuilder, but also I could have been if I decided to just push things. But I'm like, dude, I was like fucking 21 and I'm starting this stuff at 21. I'm not thinking about like trying to be the biggest massive kid on the planet at 21. I'm like, okay, we got 15 years. That's it. That's all we got. We got 15
Yeah.
years to look how we want to be, 15 years to be a pro, 15 years to win your pro show, 15 years to be a top five Olympian. That's the goal. It doesn't matter how long it takes, but by that 15-year time frame, it will be done.
I envy that mindset so much. I wish I had had it when I started.
Yeah,
It's I don't know many people that think that way in that regard. So it's super interesting to me when you do discuss those things.
yeah. I mean, it's like, what's the rush?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get it now, right? But it's like I didn't start off with that mindset.
Yeah,
And that's where I find it to be very unique in that you started off with that mindset. Like you went into this thing knowing this is a long-term thing and you had that understanding from the get-go. Um,
yeah.
I didn't.
I think if you, I don't know, like here's how I thought of it. It took me like an entire 3 years to like decide to go on pets. So
Yeah.
I did the show in 2013, and I was like, okay, cool. I want to see if I can naturally get to like 200 pounds.
Yeah.
Like I may be 197 now. That's why like when I come off, I don't lose much because I was as heavy as like 200, 210 pounds without like
Yeah.
any enhancements. So like now when I come off, I just can just stay there.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother
So
me.
do I. Yeah. I always think it's so funny when people are like, if you come off, you're going to lose all this weight. And I'm like, not if you're doing things right. Like
Yeah.
I was 238 in this off season and I came off of everything. I ended up putting on another 10 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's very interesting. It's like you have to know what you want from the get-go. And I think nowadays people don't know what they want. They want other
Yeah.
people to tell them or see other people to decide what is it that they want for themselves. So they're always like, all right, let's rush this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's do this. And then do that. And then like all of a sudden it's just like you don't see them again out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that's potentially a byproduct of how popularized bodybuilding has become and how accessible it is to everybody,
Mhm.
right? Whereas when I got into it, I knew one pro, and that's because he graduated from my high school. Um, he didn't share information.
Mm,
He offered to help me once, but never responded to me again.
mm,
Like I was 18 years old, 19 years old. And I think YouTube was around back then, but it wasn't what it is today. Instagram was around, but it was like in its very infancy.
mm.
So like our ease of accessibility to information was magazines, really.
Mm.
And that, I mean, you know what that information was like.
But that's the weird thing. Like that information was horrible, but people still followed it.
I know.
It's like people still followed it and made progress in a way,
Yeah.
and then it stopped. But it was also like, I mean, like when you think about it, like if you were to look at a magazine, if you're somebody who's, it's hard for people to think about it, but like if you were somebody who's just new into bodybuilding, and back then we had magazines and stuff like that, and you see some dude who's like a fucking jacked pro bodybuilder weighing like
Yeah.
300 pounds, and then they put like their exercises or what they do for like four sets of whatever, 15 to 20, like 20 something sets. Like
Yeah.
what would make somebody rationally in their head think like they can do that too and be successful? Like, like
There's this
you're not
notion
a
of
bodybuilder, pro,
if
so
so
that
and so
makes no
does it,
sense.
so can I. Like,
Yeah, is
yeah,
very
it's
interesting.
it's the
Like,
wildest thing to me. I never once followed any of the diets or the training programs that I saw in there because I knew that this was for a top level athlete. This was for Jay Cutler. This was for Ronnie Coleman. Like this was for people that is are not me, you know.
yeah,
And so it doesn't make sense for me to do this. They already have 150 pounds of muscle more than I do because I was, 150 pounds, 160 pounds back then, right? Like, soaking wet.
mm,
So, yeah, that's why it's so funny to me that people are trying to imitate even today, right? Like, um, they try to imitate people like, I know Justin Shire, a lot of people try to imitate his training. And really, I'm just sitting here looking at it like when you're in those early years, find a way that you can train and you can enjoy training and just be super consistent with it and just train really freaking hard.
that's literally it. It is literally it.
That's it.
It's like,
Because the longer you're at this, the more you'll figure it out, right? Like, and you'll grow. If you can, I tell kids all the time, Sam Sulik has the right idea when it comes to diet when you are 18, 19, 20 years old and you're in high school, you're in college. Pick a calorie count, pick a protein count, hit the two,
yeah,
and be consistent and consistently do it.
yeah, yeah. I think earlier I was gonna say something just like when you were like talking about like the off season when you're like, well, don't be fat or anything like that. Um, I don't know if this kind of works in a way that how other people think about it. But realistically, man, when people think about like not getting fat in the off season, it's kind of hard to do, you know? It's like really hard to do because one, you have drugs, which basically main purpose of it is to not get fat unless you just like go crazy.
Yeah.
Um, Two, you're training. You're literally building
Hmm.
muscle while on drugs almost like 24/7 because muscle protein synthesis is like highly elevated. So you're
Yep.
constantly building tissue. Um, Three is just like nutrition. I mean, it has to be perfect if you're somebody who doesn't have the genetic leeway, in a
Yep.
sense, for nutrition. But nutrition is pretty simple. I'm gonna make it sound really, really weird and it makes no sense because there's like nuances in between. But literally, like if you have drugs, you are training, you're doing your cardio, you're moving around, and your nutrition's on point, you just dictate if you want to be in a surplus or a deficit. Unless you have like digestive issues and gut issues and stuff like
Yep.
that, like literally you just eat whatever you can, You have drugs, you're training, you're eating, your protein intake is high, obviously. Like, I just don't see how people can get fat unless stress is really high.
Mhm.
Sleep is not there. Training is not there. Nutrition, they're doing the opposite of what their intended goal is supposed to be. Like,
Yeah,
if you're trying to bulk and you are eating less calories, well, you're not going to bulk,
for
obviously,
sure.
no matter what you do. If you're trying to like lose weight and you're eating more calories, well, you're not going to lose weight.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It may sound too simple, it may sound too like dumb proof, but like that's literally it.
Man, I think that for most people though, that's extremely applicable, right?
Yeah,
If
like
you're talking
90%.
about if you're yeah, I mean, you're gonna have people that you do have your outliers. Like I've worked with a guy. He's not currently a client, but he kind of comes back and forth to me.
Mm,
And if we put him too much in a calorie surplus,
mm,
um, he starts to hold a tremendous amount of water. He puts on fat really easily, whether he's on drugs or not. Um, so there's a bit of a balancing act there, and that he can't just eat whatever, right?
mm.
He can't. It's just got to be minimally above a maintenance calories, right?
That's how it should be,
Um,
usually.
Generally speaking, right? And then there are people like me, like I don't grow super easily. Um, like I'm starting to realize this year, I thought that this off season I'd gotten up to 248, and then the previous off season I'd gotten up to 238. So it's 10
Mm.
pounds heavier, but I held a better condition. So I was thinking that I was going to put on a substantial amount of tissue. But in reality, I'm dieting down. I'm already, 208. My weight cap is 209. Last year, my lowest weight was 193. And I think I stepped on stage at like 196. That was with, completely striated glutes. Like I was pretty hard. So if I'm looking at my physique now, I saw a resemblance of a glute line from the back in my back double. I would be surprised if my lowest weight was anything above like 196, 197.
Hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that. But I also think the only issue with that is when you get down that low, I mean, you have more room to grow. But when you get down that low, and how tall are you?
5'10.
Get down that low, you're 5'10", long limbs, harder to grow arms and certain body parts. You're gonna look small, but your best bet is just come in fucking peeled.
Yeah. Well, last year we realized that the 193 was probably a little emaciated,
Mm,
um, because we did have to diet really hard to get glutes in for the first time.
mm,
And I looked my best last year at probably somewhere between 200 and 203,
mm,
when we were refeeding at obviously post show. It was kind of that balance of where I had like very similar lines,
mm.
but I looked a lot better. Um, I was still dry. I was still hard. It was like I had dieted my lats off or something. It was weird.
Mm.
So this year I'm hoping that even if we do pull down to that, even if we do have to suffer and get down to that, 196, 197 range, and I do lose a little bit of tissue again, we'll have plenty of time to refill it and play with it and see, so we don't have that emaciated look. We'll see.
Yeah, agree. And I think when you looked, when you had the refeed post show and you looked a little bit better, you also have to think about like, yes, conditioning is good, but if you're very conditioned and you're small, you're not gonna be as good. So you got to find
Yeah.
like that perfect balance where like
Hmm.
you're not too conditioned, but you can pose in such a way that shows your physique to where it's like, okay, this is the best that I look because I can pose and hide my strength and weaknesses.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
don't need to be too conditioned, but you just have to have a little bit of condition, a little bit of fullness, and then just when you're loaded and you're filled out and you're just posing, the more you pose, the more it's gonna pop. Things are gonna show up a little bit
Hmm.
better. So yeah, for most people, they don't have to be conditioned. I'm also finding out that like a lot of black dudes do not need to be conditioned. They just fucking don't. One, they can't because it's very hard for them to be conditioned because their overall skin is very thick. And because the skin is like extremely thick, it takes a little bit longer for them to get
Yep,
leaner. That's why you don't
yep,
really see a lot of black dudes who are just peeled out of their fucking mind.
yep.
Just don't.
Yeah, it's not even that they're not peeled because they're more than likely peeled. They just don't have that grainy,
Hard
thin skin
look.
look. Yeah, real hard, grainy look. And I get that look.
Mm.
But I'm a white guy,
Yeah,
so
and
I'm
I don't get
pretty.
that look. I have to
I'm,
fucking
I'm,
diet
I'm
myself
is
for like
down. Yeah,
9 months.
yeah. Um, I get that look. It's more that needing to have a little bit more pop to the muscle whenever I do have that look.
Mm.
So we'll see what happens this year. So, but yeah, we've been on for almost an hour, man.
Yeah,
Um, I've enjoyed talking. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this though.
fair enough. Sounds good.